Hello, friends. I'm Lady Sophokleia, and welcome to the Hermekateia podcast. For today's episode, I would like to talk about astrology again, but this time it's going to be my personal astrology and what drew me to initially take a deeper look into and really learn astrology. So, in a nutshell, I have a very complicated / complex astrology. I have some placements that are generally looked at a certain way, and I'll get into all of it. My astrology is quite complex, and for me especially was difficult to grasp because I have a lot going on in my 12th house. So this podcast is especially for and dedicated to all of those who, like me, have a complex or complicated astrology that they don't quite grasp or it's taken them a long time to understand, and to those with difficult placements that are generally perceived in a negative way. So the reason why the 12th house in general can be a difficult placement for planets is because it is a place in your chart that's sort of hidden from you. It's hidden from you, but everyone else can see it. It's essentially where your shadow lives. So anything going on in the 12th house, really, any kind of, planetary activity that's happening there tends to be a quote-unquote difficult placement in general, just because it is hidden from the person that actually has the birth chart. That said, there are certain planets, and of course signs as well, that in the 12th house have a particularly negative connotation. And I pretty much have all of them. So in Western astrology, Mars, Saturn, and Pluto are all seen as quote-unquote malefic planets. They are planets that create a lot of difficulty, a lot of friction, a lot of tension in the life of the person who has those placements in their birth chart. And so anywhere they're placed in the birth chart can have a negative connotation. But in the 12th house, these planets tend to express themselves in more kind of under the surface ways. So, for example, Mars in the 12th house can be kind of a burning or simmering rage under the surface, depending on what sign it's in. Mars is in Western astrology is about your drive and what drives you. And so if you have Mars in your 12th house, it might be difficult to determine what it is that drives you. And again, can create just beneath the surface a kind of rage, a kind of anger that is perceptible to others, but you don't see yourself as that way. Saturn is kind of the hard master or the hard teacher. He teaches you, but he's really harsh and really rough with you. But you come out the other end learning more because you went through that difficult experience. So anywhere that Saturn goes, it tends to create discord wherever it is found. And in the 12th house, that hard master is just constantly pushing you and driving you and creating a lot of difficulty in your life, making life kind of hard, making you work hard for everything, but you do tend to get a lot out of it. It's just a very difficult placement because of the tension and the discord that it creates. And then there's Pluto. Oh, Pluto. In Western astrology, Pluto tends to be not that important. And the reason for that is because it stays in the same location for so long that lots and lots and lots of people will have the same Pluto placement, or a similar Pluto placement, I should say. Pluto will be in the same sign for many, many, many people born over a relatively long period of time. Saturn also is not considered to be a personal planet in Western astrology. It is because it is, again, so slow moving. Of course, not as slow moving as Pluto, but it stays in the same sign for a very long time, generally speaking. So generally, Pluto isn't considered to be an important planet, and certainly not a personal planet to the individual. But if it is found in the 12th or the 1st house, that's a little bit of a different story, because it creates a sort of situation that brings a whole lot of tension and resistance in your life. And so particular to this is if Pluto is aspecting something else in the area, particularly the ascendant. Generally speaking, Pluto on the ascendant is considered to be very negative in Western astrology. So Pluto is all about power dynamics. So kind of wherever it's found, it's going to create a certain power dynamic, but when it's conjunct the ascendant, it is very personal to the individual with the chart. And if you haven't guessed already, my Pluto is on my ascendant. And I have Saturn and Mars in my 12th house as well. So these took an incredibly long time for me to truly comprehend. And I think that it's given me a bit of a unique take on astrology, just because I had to work so hard for it, so hard to understand. I had to look at it from so many different angles because it just wasn't setting in my brain. I just wasn't getting it. And so these 3 planets that I have in my 12th house are all planets that I have studied extensively, for the simple reason that they're in my 12th house and they're hard for me to see and they're hard for me to comprehend. And that truly is the way it works. Another thing that made it difficult to discern my chart was the sign, because my ascendant is actually in Libra. So my 1st house is in Libra, but the way that my chart is situated, most of Libra is actually in my 12th house. And so all 3 planets that are in my 12th house are all in Libra. So even though technically my 12th house is in Virgo, all the planets in my 12th house are in Libra. So just to, complicate things even more, Mars is in Libra in my 12th house, and Mars in Libra is at a weakness in Libra. It's in detriment. Saturn in Libra is exalted. So what this means is that I have Mars in Libra, and it's in my 12th house, so it's already hidden, but it's also in a detriment, so it's very weak. So, what that has translated to in life is that I've had a lot of difficulty finding my place, finding my role, and figuring out what it is that drives me, what it is that I have passion about. Because that Mars is so hidden. It's so deep down. And essentially what it translates to in my life is that I am a person with very low ambition. Saturn exalted, oh man, in my 12th house. And then on top of it, I'm born on Saturday, which is Saturn's day. So I am quite what you might term Saturnine. It creates tension and difficulty in pretty much every area of my life. Everything that I always felt should come easily, it comes hard. I have to work for it. I have to work for pretty much everything. I've got to put in that work in order to reap the reward. Usually the reward is massive, and usually the reward is psychological, personal. It relates to my growth as a person. Wherever Saturn is found, it's always like an area of growth, an area where the person needs to learn in order to progress and go further. And then another way that I'm Saturnine, specifically relating to the exaltation of Saturn in my 12th house, is that it takes me a long time to do things. It takes me a long time to come to things. It takes me a long time to internalize things. But when I do, I internalize it completely. I am able to truly bring concepts and ideas into myself and truly understand them on a much deeper than surface knowledge level. Now let's talk about Pluto, because this one is a doozy. Like I said, usually in Western astrology, it's not viewed as important. Oftentimes astrologers won't even bother to read it unless it happens to have a placement like mine, where it's sitting right on my ascendant, and it's sitting on my ascendant or conjunct my ascendant in my 12th house. And Pluto in Western astrology is all about power. It's all about a balance of power. And it also relates to manipulation. Being able to manipulate someone or being manipulated by others. In my case, Pluto in Western astrology sitting right on the ascendant or conjunct the ascendant, it indicates that there will be special importance to power dynamics in the person's life. So through my studies, it's been my understanding that Pluto conjunct the ascendant in the first house indicates that the person has a manipulative personality and seeks to manipulate others. When it's conjunct the ascendant in the 12th house, it indicates the person will have power dynamics in their relationships where they will be the person manipulated. And because this is all occurring in Libra, all of these, in my case, relate to my relationships with other people. For example, my exalted Saturn in Libra in the 12th house indicates approval seeking. And this is true. When I was young, and I'm, with age that has calmed down, with age it's settled down. But when I was young, I absolutely was a huge approval seeker. And that was something that it took me a long time to come to terms with, because being in my 12th house, being in my shadow, I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to believe that about myself. And so deny for a while until, I finally grew up a little bit and I finally looked within and said, is this true? Could I be that way? And I realized that, yes, I absolutely was that way, and I needed to change that behavior. So that's one way that with age and wisdom, I've been able to transmute the negative, this negative aspect of my Saturn. Now, just to top all of this off, on the other side where my descendant is, I have Venus, and Venus is in Aries in my 7th house. So it's sitting exactly opposite my Pluto, so they are in opposition to each other. And just a side note about the insignificance of Pluto in Western astrology, the program that I use to look at birth charts, it literally doesn't even tell me about my Pluto. It just completely skips over it. It leaves it out. And it is incredibly significant to me. So, that was one that it really took me a long time to both come to terms with and to internalize and realize exactly what it meant and exactly what it was doing in my life. So while it took me several years to come to terms with my Saturn and what it meant to me, Pluto has been even more elusive, even more difficult for me to comprehend. Just because there's not that much out there about Pluto in Western astrology, because it's just not considered significant. So as you can see, these 12th house placements in Western astrology, are very difficult to comprehend and internalize when it's your birth chart, when it's your 12th house. When you're doing it for someone else, that's a different story. But for yourself, the 12th house does take time, and particularly when you have slow-moving planets like Saturn and Pluto.
So just like Mars and Saturn, Pluto has also borne out for me. When I was young, I always struggled with authority figures. I always had problems with authority. There was always friction there. And I've always had power imbalance in relationships as a result of this Pluto placement.
And I can tell you as well that even in the best of circumstances, like I am now, I've been married for 15 years, very happily, but there's still a power dynamic there that I have to deal with. And just to note as well the contradictory nature of these rather limiting ideas about astrology, people with my particular astrology, when it comes to my Venus and Mars, tend to be serial cheaters. Now again, I've been very happily married for 15 years. I've been in exactly 2 official long-term relationships in my life, and I've never cheated ever. So I'll get more into this contradictory nature and how it differs from Hermekate and astrology over on my Patreon and Substack. Now, I'm going to talk about what these placements mean in Hermekate and astrology and how to understand complex placements like these in Hermekate and astrology. So if you'd like to hear the rest and learn more about your complex astrology, you can join me at the Sanctuary on Patreon or at the Hermekatean Library on Substack. Otherwise, I hope you've learned something about your own complex astrology or reading for others who have a complex astrology or have difficult placements. Thank you so much for listening.
Hey, glad you found me, and thank you for listening. For the full version of this podcast, you can either join me on Substack or on Patreon. Thank you.